Welcome everybody to Webinar Wednesday. I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville. I'm the CEO of Horses and Humans Research Foundation. And just so that you know, Horses and Humans Research Foundations funds or gives out research grants about how horses help humans. But also we do a new one or innovative grant about how we can help the horse's well-being, which is this topic today is spot on. So we're looking forward to having Nina tell us all about that. I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Miller, our board member, and she's going to introduce our speaker for today.
I'm really honored to introduce Nina Ekholm Fry. She's the Director of Equine Programs at the Institute for Human-Animal Connection at the University of Denver. She also serves as a faculty member in both the Graduate School of Social Work and the Graduate School of Professional Psychology. Nina is the faculty coordinator of the Human-Animal Environment Interactions in Social Work Graduate Specialization and leads the Postmaster's Equine Assisted Mental Health Practitioner Certification Program. Her deep knowledge and unwavering dedication to equine well-being are truly inspiring, and I'm proud to call her not only a brilliant colleague, but also a close friend. Nina, you're on.
Well, I thank you so much for that warm welcome. And I feel honestly extra warmly welcome by all the colleagues I have here in this live Zoom. I know this will be a recording as well. It's really a thrill and an honor to see everybody coming together. As you know, we have the hour here where we'll talk a bit about what can we do? What can I do when it comes to improving welfare and well-being for our horses? And I have a slide deck that I'll have active throughout today. I want to encourage, though, especially, of course, you folks who are live here, that this is a powerful thing to come together with potentially, right, like-minded, potentially folks who are interested in thinking and talking about horses in this way. And I learned that the chat for today is open, meaning you can interact with each other throughout this presentation. And I warmly welcome that. We'll have a Q&A, or as I say, ask and explore toward the end of the hour, where we'll kind of have more of that formal back and forth. And I won't be looking at the chat while I'm talking. However, I think it's even more important than at just asking me questions that everybody here shares and reflects and interacts, like I said, in that chat throughout. And that's open for you all to do. I'm going to go ahead now and start my screen share. And just make sure everybody can see that just fine. I trust that Marcy will tell me as the official host if anything is amiss.
Looks good.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much to the Horses and Humans Research Foundation for having me today and for the warm introduction by my colleague and friend, Joanne Miller. As you heard, I work at University of Denver. I wanted just to send warm greetings from us to you all. I can tell there's folks from all around the world here. At University of Denver, we have an Institute for Human-Animal Connection, and this institute conducts research as well as provide professional training in the areas of human-animal connection, of course, related to horses, but also to other species. And I also wanted to give you a little bit of context of why I'm here and talking about what I'm talking about today. Joanne introduced me so nicely there. I come to you, of course, from working in academia, working with horse behavior and horse welfare, and as you heard, also with human-horse interaction in human services, specializing in psychotherapy. So I work with academic colleagues and, of course, graduate students, both master's level and doctoral level students. But I also come to you from being a person who works in the horse industry. That might be you too. I am a farrier. I have a small farrier business here on the side. I also do behavior consultation. I do facility design consultation. I work with people one-on-one and sometimes in groups out and about in the horse world. And when I was invited, and I was invited based on you can talk about behavior and welfare, go ahead. I thought a lot about what would be useful for this group and for this context. I know there's been a lot of useful equine welfare education coming from Horses and Humans Research Foundation and from other platforms as well that offer so graciously these free online, accessed webinars. So I thought about, of course, we'll have some tips and we'll have some information that's science-based about horses and our interactions with them. But I also thought about how it's not necessarily that we're lacking research. It's not necessarily that we don't have any information, that horses are this big mystery to us. It's actually quite the opposite. We know a lot about horses. Of course, there's a lot more to know about our fellow social mammal, but what I see when I'm out and about in horse communities is more so an issue of implementation. There exists knowledge about horses, but the sort of putting it into use or the knowledge being digestible or reachable for people, that's more of what's going on. So as I set this presentation up, and because I'm a human professional, I'm a psychologist trained in Finland, I think a lot about, how people think and how people feel too, not just how horses think and feel. So what I wanted to do was really frame these tips over these hour, of course, from the perspective of, hey, what can I do for my horse? How can I adjust? What can I add? What can I maybe take away to benefit my horse and the horses around me? But also, what are some internal things that might be going on in our minds as humans that might influence this process? Because here we are, if you have a horse, you're the number one influence on their life and well-being, either indirectly through decisions you're making about where this horse lives and how that environment looks and what that horse does and doesn't do, or directly through your direct actions, with your horse. But you are also influenced by your own species membership, meaning things that we tend to do as humans. So what can I do is an exciting question. It could also be, what can I do? And this is a question that I've been asked many a time. So I thought, again, that we could think about this together. And speaking of together, I thought we'd start by thinking a little bit about social psychology and the influence it has on us as group living human species members. And that's why I'm so encouraged by the fact that there's a lot of folks live today. Like I said, feel free to use that chat function, share, reflect, and take benefit from the fact that we're all together here today. So I pulled together some key tenets from social psychology. Here's some examples, and just like when we're talking about horses as a species, there's individual differences, there are spectra, there are dimensions of how we experience things. But here are a few key things. Humans, per social psychology, have a social need to feel like they belong. And if there's a sense that we are not in the group, that can bring about some uncomfortable feelings. That can bring about behaviors, in fact, that makes us want to return to the group. And for most of maybe us gathered here today, this can be more conceptual. This can be more, hey, I have a different opinion than you, or hey, you are acting in a way that is not right for me. So, but belonging is a strong value. And I want you, as I'm talking now, thinking about a time just for yourself. You're welcome to share in the chat. It won't be, broadcast on this recording, but you're welcome to share a time where you're needing to prioritize group membership over perhaps a decision that you may have wanted to make with your horse or about your horse. Okay. Another feature is feeling right and feeling good. No surprise, just like horses, we tend to move away from discomfort, move toward good feelings. And this is a strong need for humans too. And I want you to think about how feeling right and feeling good may impede people in general, maybe you too, when it comes to acquiring new knowledge, implementing new knowledge in your horse interactions. Because after all, most people see their horses in a human social context. There are some folks, myself included, who have horses on your own property where it's only your family members or you who see those horses. There's not a constant presence of other people. But for most people, the reality is that horses are living together in larger groups, and you go there where the horses are, and there are other people there as well. So again, feel free to share in the chat or reflect to yourself, what barriers might you think of in terms of implementing knowledge about horses where feeling right and feeling good could be a barrier as a species feature for us? Then the final thing is that I chose to highlight is having a consistent self-concept. And this is a theory, again, in social psychology, meaning we'd like to align with our values and what we think should happen, our attitudes in different situations. And we want them to align with our behaviors. This is good old cognitive dissonance theory. Leo Festinger from the 50s, you might be very familiar with this, is important kind of to know about, but we then seek to avoid dissonance. If there is a perceived mismatch between who am I? Well, I'm a good person. I want to do good things. I love horses. And if there's a mismatch between this and a behavior that we do, a piece of equipment that we choose to apply, or a situation that just went wrong. In those situations, it could be that our need for our constant or consistent self-concept overrides our taking in that information of maybe I shouldn't have done that. And it turns into, oh, that was the horse's fault, or that happened because of ABC, because I'm a good person after all. I could never harm a horse. It could not be me. So we come to great lengths to avoid dissonance, again, between what we hold in our minds and how we act on the outside. And I wanted to highlight this little quote because this came up in a recent conversation last month where I was talking to a person about horse-related things, and they said, well, I don't want to seem negative. That's not me. I'm a positive person. I'm not a complainer. I don't want to really speak up here, or I don't want to take this action because that might make me seem negative. And that's not how I want to be. And yes, you can see this could be a barrier to you making maybe there's some changes based on some of the tips and things we'll discuss today. So, and again, everybody to their own degree here. For some folks, it's like, yeah, that's fine. I can be negative and I'm okay with other perceiving me that way. And for others, that's not feeling quite comfortable. And let's not forget that we also experience our emotions and sensory inputs from the environment at different rates. So we don't just have one human scale to go by here. So as we then think about our social setting, now let's turn to an area. I chose a few things where we can pull out some tips to improve our horse's well-being and also maybe our own direction of where we want to go with horses. Decision making. So let's say that you are at a multi-service facility. You are perhaps, meaning there's people boarding horses, maybe training horses, there's other people there. And maybe you're leading your horse. Maybe you're leading your horse down a walkway to some pastures. Maybe you're leading your horse from outside into a building and there's a shadow kind of falling across. And maybe in that moment, you're choosing to stop and let your horse look at something. Maybe your horse is turning their head to the side and you're letting them, and you're giving them slack in the lead line to not apply extra pressure on their head, and you're taking a little break. You're just taking a little breather. You're taking a few seconds in that moment as you're, again, not blocking anybody, not doing anything. However, as you're doing this, you see some other people come by, maybe the barn manager, maybe another boarder, and they catch your eye. And you get a feeling. Maybe it's a clamping of your stomach, maybe it's a tension across your chest, maybe it's tension across your temples. And you get a feeling like, uh-oh. What happens next is actually what I want to highlight, meaning you have an uncomfortable feeling, that happens, but how do you interpret it in that moment? Is it that you did something wrong? Oh no, I shouldn't have let my horse stop like this. I shouldn't have, they'll learn to stop every time we go into the arena now. And then everybody will think that I don't know what I'm doing. Or maybe they saw me walking and they thought that person doesn't have control over their horse. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. That is one option to interpret that feeling that you got after those folks caught your eye. Another option could be, keeping our social psychology kind of on board here, could be, did I perceive them sort of judging me? Am I now in the out group? Is that dangerous to me? Could be. But right now, is it really? In other words, sometimes our body sends us signals in different situations, and we may, when we're with horses, interpret that as a gut feeling that what you did wasn't right. But keep in mind that strong social group shaping, that could also be the reason. And we can think through that. We can think through that because to me, that example sounded just fine. And if somebody had a thought about it, let them. So in other words, everybody here and everybody what may be watching this later, I don't need to discuss your intentions. I know you're good people. I know you like horses. We don't have to debate that. I'm not as interested in that. It would be very rare to find ill intention in the hearts and souls of folks here. So we can leave that to the side. I accept that. I see you as that. I have no doubt. What comes next, though, is of more interest. So we have actions that we take, and then we have the outcome. And it's important to separate that intention from the outcome, right? Like we have good intention, but it doesn't translate to good welfare. Like love doesn't translate to good welfare. Good intention doesn't translate to that same received outcome. So the most important part of this isn't, to me, your intention. It is what happens between just before you take action. And I want you to, again, think about this for yourself, how this feels. I know also from my own feeling that it hurts a bit when people assume things or think I don't have good intentions or something like that. But it's okay. You do. You know that, and you know best what intentions you had. But looking between, just before the action, how do I start learning more about what happens here? Because the action is truly where the change happens if you want to implement new things, right? But we have a little bit of a situation, maybe, in the horse world that's been a system based on hierarchy. It's been a system based on very kind of acute privilege, who gets to do things and how that looks. So we have a lot of messages in our regular horse world. I work primarily in the US and in Europe, so that's my area of experience. But we have messages that come and are also marketed, or not marketed, but transmitted maybe to us, also from role models, also in equestrian competition, a whole system, in fact. Messages like, horses need a strong leader. Don't let them get away with stuff. And feel free, by the way, to add to the chat if these are things you've heard or other things that you commonly hear. You're going to get hurt. Don't let that gelding disrespect you. That mare knows better. And a sort of thing that I noticed when I moved to the United States, what a little shit. People referring to horses this way. I was like, okay, all right. We have our own versions in Finland, don't worry. But what a little shit. And then the kind of idea that horses should not have opinions or negative emotions. They should, in fact, do what you tell them, you know, and they should do that at all times, no matter the time of day, no matter their circumstance. And also that horses enjoy what humans like to do. So of course they want to come with me to the arena or to the tack up area or whatnot. These are assumptions and these are messages that we carry in that space between our love for horses and our enjoyment of horse sports, leisure activities, inclusion of horses in human services, whatever you all are doing. I can see examples of all reflected in who's here today. And those things also impact that moment before action, because that's really the only thing you can change. If you want to change things, you can change that moment before action. But it's hard, because I wanted us to, again, you can use the chat, you can think about it yourself, take a moment and think about what happens for you when a horse doesn't do what I tell them. Maybe also in those social settings where those other humans are around, but maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe it's just you and the horse. So what happens for me when a horse doesn't do what I tell them? Here's some examples from other people and from myself too. I feel embarrassed. I'm worried about safety. I feel anxious. I look bad in front of others. I can't tolerate the disrespect. I should have listened to the trainer. I need to let the horse know who's in charge. If I can't get this right, should I even be doing this? I'm ashamed of how things are going. So maybe this is familiar to you. Maybe you have your own versions, right, that you cherish, that you think about all the time. I make light of it, but we tend to have our own kind of tracks going here. But here is a decision point. That first message is going to be there. Sometimes we have thoughts, sometimes we have feelings. Not all thoughts and feelings are equally valuable in your life. And this one, we could, for instance, recognize that it's there, the ones from the last slide, and then do a little replacement. This is kind of a favorite activity of certain cognitive behavioral therapies in clinical psychology, a little override. It's okay that you have that initial message. It's more what you do with it later. Here's some examples of some more productive ones, and feel free to share which ones you might have also in your life in the chat. You could say, hey, self, I'm a guardian of this horse. You know, maybe that changes things. Hey, I'm a responsible party in this equation. hey, remember, I need to take action that safeguards relationships, not just human relationships, not just social lubricant in my boarding facility, but also with my horses. I need to consider the vulnerable position of the horse here. And I mean that structurally. And I mean that also directly in the interaction. I need to use problem-solving skills. Reminder, maybe I need to take a beat. And then remember, pull my plan out. Okay, what was I supposed to do when this happens? Or, I wonder what I could do now. I wonder what would be a good next step instead of what I maybe automatically might fall into. I am a detective. That's one of mine. I use that. Reminds me, like, hey, I'm here to gather information. This is not personal to me, but I sure as heck have a lot of responsibility here. What could have led to this? What is happening right now? Is this an emergency? It's likely not. Maybe a social emergency at the barn. So that's an example, right? It's the moment, let the first message come. Find one, practice adding it. You can write it on your hand, have it on a laminate in your pocket, and do something like that. Just practice to see, does it change what might come next? Because this is truly the most important part. The outcome is, of course, very, very important. But this is where we have choice and where we can impact our horses' welfare. Well, but what happens here? How do I go about it? We just did a little bit of a tip there, but it also has to do with, of course, knowledge of what am I looking for? What kind of action would be good for welfare? What decisions should I make? And my last tip in this category of decision making is you too can elevate your decision-making process using something called evidence-based practice. If you work in healthcare, you're like EBP, got it. If you work in education, yep, you've heard this term before. EBP, evidence-based practice, about 30 years old-ish. The idea was simply, it sounds like it's something more, but it's quite simple. It means when you're faced with a decision, and it uses language here like clinical decision, but let's say it's a decision about horses. When you're faced with a decision, you need to consider, hey, what do I know about this? What do I already know? Who's my horse? The horse is the patient here in this illustration. What are their particular needs and preferences individually? And instead of stopping there, we're going to go one more step and we're going to look at research findings. We're going to look at empirical information. We're going to look, as we say in Sweden, beyond our own nose. We're going to look at a third place where information can come from, and we're going to take that and we're going to consider it for our specific decision-making in this moment. That's how healthcare should operate. That's how education should operate. And I'll give you a brief example of this now. Let's say that you are maybe a new horse owner or adopted a horse, and you brought this horse to a boarding facility. The horse has arrived, you're over there, barn manager comes over and says, uh-oh, we have a problem. Okay. Your horse is a cribber. Oh, okay. And cribbing is a stereotypy. We have some experts on cribbing that are present here, even in this meeting. But it's a stereotypy. The horse sort of either uses a surface or gulps air from mid-air, and it's quite loud and visually poignant behavior. Okay. Barn manager says, "Yep, this is going to be a problem. Let me tell you what we should do. We're going to of course, put your horse away, like the back, so that other horses can't learn this behavior. We have to keep them away from other horses. We don't want this catching on. And then we're going to probably keep your horse kind of like very active. We're going to forego kind of a settling in time because this horse clearly has to move. And we'll get you a miracle collar or a cribbing collar, and we'll call it good. Now, this situation without your elevated decision-making process might look like, okay, sounds good. Barn manager said it, But, and I have some QR codes throughout, folks, by the way. If you have a phone near you, you can just put it up to the screen, capture that URL, and you'll see what's behind there. This happens to be a summary. It's not a research paper that's behind a paywall, but it's a summary article from The Horse that talks to a number of experts about the latest research in crib biting from last year. You could read that. You could say, thank you for your input, barn manager. Let me get back to you on this. And then you can realize, ooh, there were some misconceptions, like crib biting is not socially learned. Cribbing is associated with stress primarily, and there's some theories about gut biome and things like that. There's some potential genetic predisposition that's also been debated, but we do know that reducing stress and increasing access to needs like foraging, like social housing, etc., will actually help most horses. And sometimes we have to help them a little extra to prioritize other behaviors than this cribbing. But that's an example, right? That's a live example. Feel free to put one in the chat if you've come across an example like this, where instead of stopping in that dialogue, you went on the internet and you did find a good science-based source and you integrated that into your decision making. And as I started here, I said, I think it's not so much about access or kind of access to information as it is about like taking on the information, implementing the information. And here is some top tips in this area. You might have heard this quote before. The eyes cannot see what the mind does not know. Now, broadly speaking, slightly philosophically, kind of true in some ways. It simply means that if we don't know it, if we don't have that information, it's hard to interpret, let's say, horse behavior. And you might find yourself in a position where somebody says, what, can't you see that? Haven't you noticed? And that can feel pretty, not so good socially. But that's quite all right, because there are plenty of examples of this problem in the horse world, not to worry. This is an image from a website, ridinghorses.com. I am not affiliated with this website. They might not even exist. I haven't checked this URL for a while, but since this was their business model to sort of publish things and teach people, I thought I would reference them. And they had this image there. The caption I've blown up here to the side says, you can almost feel the enthusiasm in this horse. And I see something different, right, when I look at this horse. But somebody looked at this horse and said, this horse is loving it. This horse is enthusiastic, willing to work, active, etc. And instead, I see other things like excessive sweating patterns. I see a lot of tension in the face and around the eye. I don't have a good angle here, but it seems like this horse has been sort of doing a bunch of stuff and is not feeling too comfy, right? So we do need some information, right, to help train our eyes, or our mind rather, so our eyes can see things. I have a few resources. These are just a few of many that exist in the world. So I'm sure you have some good ones. Feel free to drop them in the chat as well. Oh, before I go there, and I'm hesitating because we have actually somebody who's on here on this call who's, no, actually it's Christina, not Christine. That's right. Last month, something important happened. And that was a presentation to the FEI, International Equestrian Federation Veterinary Committee, from a group of colleagues who I admire and whose work I follow. And this was an invited address based on some concerns that had been communicated about high-level equestrian sport and equipment-induced pressure. This is you can capture this QR code and learn more about this. I don't want to linger here, but this is an excellent example of the eyes can't see what the mind does not know, and an ongoing conversation about issues at an elite sport level. This happens to be about dressage, but we can also talk about other sports, equestrian sports, and that the whole content of this presentation is based on professional level photography by Crispin Perelius Johannesson. You might have heard of this person. He takes professional frame by frame photography to reduce the moment in time fallacy, that was just a moment in time. Instead, there's continuous still image of horses in public settings throughout competitions. So again, the eyes can't see what the mind doesn't know exists at a very high level in the horse world. All right, here are a few resources that I wanted to share with you. You can capture them here. A Finnish colleague of mine, a group of colleagues made a science meets comics science implementation book, and it is really nice, and it is affordable, and it is shareable across ages, and it's a really useful, fun resource, and it also has QR codes. Who would have known that you can keep learning there? So I've really enjoyed and gotten to collaborate a bit with this team with this. I've really enjoyed this publication and the other publications that they have also for dogs and other species. So I wanted to share this resource as a accessible, horse person friendly resource who are out there, out and about doing their horse stuff. A classic by now, Language, Science, and Common Signals, a book full of pictures. It's very useful to train your eye to nuances in horse behaviors by Rachel Dreisma. Some of you know her and her work. There's also an online visual course. I tend to direct people here because, again, there's a number of pictures to look at with subtle behaviors to train your eye. And it's also quite affordable and accessible. I would be amiss if and I am biased because I was part of developing these guidelines, if I didn't mention the Ohio guidelines for equine care and welfare and training and handling. These guidelines are detailed and to me represent a coming together of science-based thinking about horses. And I'm so glad that Ohio went for the wordy format. Thank you, Ohio, for accepting our version here. So this is a great resource to also read about, when horses are working in human services, what are some of these considerations that I could keep in mind when I want to improve things. Now, here's one of our courses. We have an equine behavior course at University of Denver, and I find that the power of this course is really the fact that it is a community. It is an instructor-led course, and that to me is a key factor of implementing information, that you're not needing to go at it alone, that you'll make connections with other professionals and other leisure horse people, but you're together, because that social influence that can trip us up also works in our favor if we let it. So again, I encourage you, there's also other options, of course, but this has my horse Shiloh on it, so we're going with this resource here. Another group event that's coming up that I'm very honored to be on the planning committee for and the scientific committee for is the upcoming International Society for Equitation Science conference that's coming up, the 20th anniversary conference, in fact, right here in the US, right here in my home state of Colorado. And again, kind of flagging this idea of coming together as in group events, perhaps needing to come from near and far, but finding that sense of community, making use of that social psychology when it comes to striving for, specifically striving for improvement and improving connections with horses through science. Now, so we're talking now about, yeah, we need to onboard some information here so we can sharpen our eyes and our minds and keep sort of working toward what we want, which is a better future for our horses, I believe. But like I said, use your social context here. If I didn't have a network of colleagues, and believe me, they don't live here, right where I live, I couldn't do what I do, I don't think. So gather yourselves, find connection, find social settings, surround yourself with people who have similar values and ideas. It'll make things easier. You'll see plenty of other people out and about at your barn or in other horse settings, but make yourself communities that you keep in touch with. It'll make things so much easier. And the same goes for your continued commitment to learning. When we set up our equine behavior course, I was asked, hey, why don't we make it asynchronous? Why don't we make it as you go? Why don't we, that's a better business model. But I think that there's value in being consistently exposed together with a group. The course is just 15 weeks, but I'm talking about setting things up for yourself when it comes to, like, maybe you tell your Instagram algorithm, if you're still on Meta platforms, maybe you tell your algorithm, let me see Renate Larsson's content. Renate will do a webinar, she's a Swedish colleague of mine, will do a webinar for HHRF on June 11th, which is amazing. Don't miss that. That's a great thing. I follow Renate's content. I don't make content on Instagram myself, but I sure benefit from my colleagues. And I tell Instagram, you send me equine ethology content, you send me, equine science stuff. That's what I want to see. So that you have this constant exposure. It's not that one time when you sat down and wonder, what should I read? What articles should I read? There's so much talk about science, but I don't know where to start. It's better to set up kind of a routine of being exposed to materials. And you can make that for yourself. That'll help things also feel more accessible. So we've arrived now to my last section here. And that I promised some direct tips. And the thing about these tips is they are based on known things. You might have heard them before. And I again want to say that it's okay to be like, hey, I know this, but I'm just struggling to implement. I'm struggling to take that action. That's really what I'm, scientifically also interested in, that part of the equation. But let's look at, breaking tips down into two main areas. Think about tips in the area of living environment and your horse's health overall, sort of their life, how they spend most of their lives. And then think about tips in your direct interaction with them, meaning direct handling and training. You are there, your hands are moving, you are touching, you are doing things, okay? Those are the two categories or buckets that I wanted to share some tips in. So bucket number one, living environment needs. This is just a visual reminder of the very basic needs of horses, the most basic needs. We have movement. We have forage passing through, or roughage passing through their gastrointestinal systems. We have access to horses, full body access to horses. We have some shelter options, some comfort to lay down, some choice in who they affiliate with and who they are near. Some variation in the environment is important. And of course, generally speaking, health care and health maintenance. And we have health issues that arise because of the living environment. And that's true for us humans too. So we have to keep an extra eye on things like that. So when it comes to this, then maybe everybody here is on board, but it doesn't hurt repeating that the living environment, how your horse spends most of their time, affects their health and behavior. And it affects it in a multitude of ways, including like low chronic stress levels, inflammation, frustration, also boredom, which is another form of frustration, issues with musculoskeletal functioning, gastrointestinal functioning, you name it, mental health, physical health. Unrestricted movement, restricted or forced movement, by the way, does not replace the horses making choices about their movement, meaning a hot walker does not replace or satisfy a movement-related need, meaning a machine that pushes the horse, kind of makes them go in a circle. Forage, social housing, and choice. The problem is, of course, well, what if my horse doesn't have that? What if the facilities that I can afford to keep horses in don't do this? What if people are against this? And they have good reasons, because we're meaning-making machines, don't forget, as humans, we can come up with reasons for anything. That's why we had debate team where you debated issues from all angles, because, your brain can come up with justification. That doesn't mean that something is right, though, just because there's a reason for it. So think of these basic equine needs areas as dimensions, not endpoints. That there's not a, well, if the horse doesn't have 400 acres, well, then I guess they can't have movement then, and it's not like that. It's a dimension. What can you do within the dimension of unrestricted movement? What can you do within the dimension of forage? What can you do in the dimension of social housing and choice? So find ways to expand on areas where needs are restricted. Can you prolong eating time? Can you convince a human to do a little corridor loop around from one part of the living area to another? And I use that term a lot, living environment, because I want people to remember that this is how the horse actually spends their entire life. This is it, So that's the idea here. And this is, of course, there's people who can help with this. You can be creative. You have restrictions if it's not your own place, but you can find small ways. If that's even you hand walking a horse or moving a horse to a different enclosure part of the day or whatever it is, but work within those dimensions. This is really your best bet here for improving welfare, and provide opportunity for exploratory behavior. Exploratory behavior actually has been shown to increase learning capacity in young horses. That's a study by Janne Winter Christensen and colleagues from a few years back. So exploratory behavior can be scent work. It can be, seeing new things, getting some treats somewhere where there wasn't typically some. It's really good for horses. And folks, listen carefully. When you hear somebody say that a horse is a biter, they bite, or they're grumpy. Oh, that horse is grumpy. That horse is a bitch. As soon as you hear these things, you can be like, oh, that might mean that there's a health issue. That should be the next step, not, yeah, they're a snot, blah, blah. It should be, interesting. Let me check that out. Let me explore this. Pain has many expressions, and hard to catch can be back chaining to my back hurts or my something hurts. My next set of tips here as we start rolling into our final part and doing some live questions. The next tip is that it has to do with direct interactions. So kind of basic premise here that training and handling of horses should be based on scientific theory of how horses learn and the importance of emotion states in the learning process. You know this for yourself. You're not making good learning decisions if you're sensory overwhelmed, if you're decision fatigued, if you're sort of reaching the capacity of regulation emotionally. That's not a great spot to be. Let's not put horses in that spot. And we should focus on these things and sort of remember that some of these things like respect or leadership, the way we tend to think about them because we're a different species, might lead us astray. Even if people try to use terms to help people learn, consider that they might be too simplistic, or they might be based on other assumptions of power that you might not want to buy into. And here's a top tip as well. And all this takes practice. It's easy for me to say, here's a tip, you can choose one thing from today and see if you can incorporate it for a while. That's how a new habit, starts. Allow horses to tell you things about their own state and experience, meaning if your hand goes to correct that head motion, stop before the action. See if you can go, the horse is saying something here. I mean, protect yourself physically if there's a tail swatting your eyeballs, which is very painful. But generally, let the horse, allow them to tell you things about their own state and experience. Can you take that in without that nagging message that you're now looking bad or something like that? Turn that around. Use some interaction checks. Meaning if you're having just the bestest time petting or scratching or brushing your horse, be sure to pause in between to see, is this still a comfortable thing we're doing, or is the horse just bracing at this point? Are they just sort of holding against you, or are they even, as you pause, going, okay, I can leave maybe? But we can't rely solely on horses taking large, decisive actions around us. We know that horses are conditioned to follow orders, and there could be consequences. So we have responsibility. We're the responsible party. So use interaction checks and also lessen your own intensity. Take little breaks for yourself. Go sit down, drink some water, count to 10. All of that's good. You can take breaks unless you are in an absolute emergency and a horse could run into a interstate with a halter and a lead rope only. Then you have to take emergency measures. Very few things are emergencies. You can always stop, reassess, and think, what's my plan? Maybe you write it down. It's easier to kind of remember in the heat of the moment. What's my plan here? You can always take time. You're not going to mess up learning. You're not going to cause, a behavior that will never go away now. That's not how this works, generally speaking. Act like a human. By that, I mean, if you're good at making consistent sounds with your mouth, that's a good way to signal with a horse then. Use your thinking skills, use your reasoning skills. Use your own ability to say, hey, I need to take a little break for myself here. I'm getting a little heated. And really think about your own ideas around power and how it feels to have power, because we have power over horses, and some misunderstandings about horses and that feeling that the horse is irking you or spiting you or something like that. That's pretty dangerous for the horse. And it's not so helpful for you to have this misconception. So acting like a human means that I can think through things, I can reason, I can make plans, I can make change if I want to, even in the face of social group pressures at my barn. We want to reduce unnecessary pressure on the horse's head and their bodies. When we have equipment, there's pressure. That happens, but we want to really be thoughtful about it. You should be watching that lead rope. You should be watching that halter pressure. You should get broad surfaces for pressure to land on, etc. Broadly speaking. I often say this is a free thing that can help horses sustain in, let's say, human service programs, but it's a difficult thing because it involves human behavior change. And then, as I mentioned, pause, don't push. It can help to say that. Pause, don't push. If you're in a tricky situation with the horse, pause, don't keep pushing. You can plan, you can regroup, and you can think. Again, unless it's an abject mega emergency, you can stop, you can step back, you can regroup, you can drink some water, you can think this through. And if you have a good community with you, you can hear your friend's voice in your head saying, you can do this. You're making good choices now. Maybe that's even your own voice. And I threw in a little bit of a fun thing that I find very useful. This is not an actual theory or something that exists, but I call it the AAA because it's fun. And that's building in moments of awe, appreciation, and admiration of your horse on purpose. What a handsome one. Oh, look at this mane. Oh, this mane is so beautiful. Oh, look at nature. Look at this beautiful day. Look at this. I can hear this bird. Oh, how lovely. That kind of stuff. And my final message, because I just glanced at the time, is to protect horses. And I know that's our intention. And I know that we fail at this, and that's okay too. But really, that's how we can improve their welfare, by taking steps to protect them in how we speak about them, in how we respond to others when they take action with horses. And of course, modeling our own interactions with horses. That's the key. All right. I'm going to come out of my share, and I have left my gracious host a single minute, which was not my intention, but it was the outcome. Marcy, how are we here?
So Nina, we are not rigid on the time. I mean, we, out of respect for, our participants, we don't want to keep people stuck if they have to leave, and a few people have already stepped away. But I think if you're good, then if those who want to stay, it depends how you choose to do it, raise their hand. If people can unmute themselves, we can do that one at a time, or I can use my magical powers and unmute them. There's some lovely comments in the chat. I hope people have been able to look at them and read them. If there are no live comments, we can certainly read through the chat. So do you want to just open it up and ask people what they'd like to say?
Yes. And again, since we promised the hour is up. And what
Okay.
we're transitioning now into is just a few extra minutes to see if there were any direct questions that I can help answer. But it sounds like, and I'm starting to open the chat now, that that's been a great space too. And that was really my wish, for today. But would love I love questions. So would love to hear if there's anybody who would like to ask me a direct question or make a comment.
Nina, it's Kate Nickel. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I've been doing this work with a physical disability, and what I'm really interested too is your thoughts on, like you talked about the power of the pause, being a detective, all these important process things, and um, and like your somatic use of yourself with your horse. Like when you feel joined up, or when you like what you're, or those times where you're feeling like, oh, I'm in my brain and I feel like I need to have the right answer for the person who's watching me from a distance.
Yes.
So, you talked about the power of a pause, and you can think about a breath or taking a drink of water and things. Do you have other thoughts or tips on, like, getting in check with your somatic um, self in relation to horses?
Yeah, I mean, how I broadly approach this, I tend to say, and this is also based on research, a cumulative body of research, generally speaking, what we do with the horse or to the horse supersedes our emotion state in the moment. Meaning we could be calm and just in the right vibe, but if we're pulling on that halter or pinching that thing, the behavior supersedes the state. I say that, I start my answer only to say, because there's a lot of focus on sort of being in the right regulatory space with horses. But for some folks with physical disabilities, not talking about yours, of course, Kate, just generally speaking, with physical disabilities, with chronic pain, with other body-related challenges, that can feel like a goal that can't be reached, you know? And so I always want to unpack a little around that and sort of reassure folks too, that just like people, horses have different thresholds of capacity for human tension and human movement and things like that. But more specifically to your question, I think also about it as what I said earlier, not every thought has the same priority. Not every emotion has the same priority. Sometimes our bodies hurt and we have to distract ourselves. Sometimes we have to not be there for a little bit. And that's okay too. It doesn't impact your horsemanship. It doesn't impact things unless you start feeling, like you're going to trip, or, you're kind of losing connection to your own feet or to your own movement or things like that. So I would say overall, something that's I've made use of more lately is doing kind of like a little like biosynergy check, like looking at a tree, looking at a context of biosphere and just sort of belonging in that instead of just the internal, like, okay, how is this? How is that? Is this okay? Is my shoulder relaxed? That kind of thing. So I don't know if that's what you're kind of the area, but I thought that your question was so interesting that I kind of went a little bit around.
No, thank you.
Wonderful.
That is great. Any other questions?
I see so many interesting things.
So maybe I will just bring up something from the chat that Joanne Miller put in, because it seemed to have gotten a number of responses. We have always done it this way is the biggest hurdle for change. How do we help others see that it's okay to change? Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I love that, because it speaks directly to, we have always done it this way, or I've done it this way because my family does it this way. It's a social context. It's that same, pressure of, we want to belong, we want to feel right, we want to feel good, and we want to feel steady in our self-concept. And it becomes a problem when we attach ourselves to a person or an action, like we've always done it because I value loyalty, I value consistency, these are my family's values, I have to keep that going, versus ideas change. And my value is to, keep developing. So when people are saying, we've always done it this way, my first question is, how much power do you have in this situation? Do you have any leverage? Is the power mostly that you're modeling yourself? Like that, like it becomes like, I have autonomy over myself in this moment, so I'm modeling new things. Otherwise, I would say, I'm part of this community, I'm part of this group, I've heard from this, like we use those social psychology principles here too. I'm part of this setting. And I heard about this thing, let me know what you like. Maybe we could look at this together, or I practice this and it really seems to sort of take some pressure off our farm staff even. Like it's more like that, like leading with like a social context, trying to create another social context to join. So some people don't feel like they're setting out by themselves. Again, some people have larger tolerance for that, and we see change happen. But for a lot of humans, I have to remind myself this too, for a lot of humans, a single idea is too scary to pursue because the group isn't with it. So we have to come up with the context around it for change.
Right. And admitting that you've been doing something wrong for a very, very, very long time is very hard for probably most of us, right?
Yes.
Even
What
if
the
there's a better
eyes,
way.
the eyes
Mhm.
can't see what the mind doesn't know yet. And that's what it's like, do your best until you know better and then do better. Like those principles. There has to be a mindset in the other person. But I think what's been helpful for me if I'm in situations that I call the long game situations, meaning I'm influencing a neighbor, I'm influencing a colleague, just over a long period of time, is to help those fundamental inner processes in humans that make us feel defensive, that make us feel uncertain, and that make us then push away any change or any willingness that sort of implies that your self-concept, right? That the consistency of it would need to change. So help people be who they are still, and then add this thing. I think
Yeah.
that's the scary part for people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina. This was really spectacular. Thank you to everyone who attended. We're very grateful and we all learned a lot. And we love you. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. I'm going to stop recording now. There we are.